Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Ask the Trainer special. And today I'm very excited because we have a very cool guest. We've got Kris Theorin with us, who created Grump in the Night, and also Dr. Sassi is here. Michelle is in the background, taking care of the chat. And yeah, we are going to talk this amazing short film that Kris created. But before we dive into that, I wanted to take care of the housekeeping, so let's do that. Yeah, here I am on the Maxon events page, maxon.net/events. You can also go there by going to news and then events. That's the site where you end up. And here you can find all of the events that we're doing. They are for free, at least the webinars. Some of the live events aren't, of course. But yeah, today we're doing the Ask the Trainer special about the making of Grump in the Night. Then tomorrow we're gonna have another episode of VFX and Chill. Next Monday we are gonna start with a new demystifying post-production series called Plan, Shoot, Edit, Create VFX. And next Thursday we're gonna have Max on Color again. Right, so yeah, we of course have a lot of other events. You can go through that site by yourself. One important thing that you need to know is that if you missed one show, or if you just want to rewatch it, you can go to the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel, and here you find the recordings of everything we do online, and you can rewatch it. And then we always love to yeah, share stuff and give away free stuff. So here is our Ask the Trainer exclusive wear shop, where you can order a t-shirt for free and you only have to pay for the shipping. There is a coupon code um, with that. So you just have to type in that coupon code. It's Particle Magic, and I think we're gonna type that into the chat area as well. And yeah, let's just start with what Kris has to show, or who Kris is, and so on. So let me jump back here. And hey, how you doing?
Hey,
So it's great to have you here. I'm very excited about the project that you created, or at least, well, more projects that you created. But today we want to talk about Grump in the Night. But first, let's just yeah, introduce yourself, and because
yeah.
that's already exciting, I think.
Yeah, so I mean, I am Kris Theorin. I am one of the creative directors at Something's Awry Productions. We specialize in doing both commercial projects and then our own short films that we'll post on our YouTube or Instagram. And both the commercial and these short films we do, they all sort of have a specialization trying to be a bit more cinematic, more sort of whimsical animation that's both like colorful, fun, and just sort of has just a creative. We try to make it have like a more creative vibe all around, because that's the sort of stuff that I love to do in 3D, and that's like what we find to be like the most appealing way to approach like these short films.
Yeah, that's cool. So, yeah, let's talk a little bit about Grump in the Night. So, if in case you haven't seen it, we can share the link in the chat. But here we've got another another scene where you can watch the movie as we are talking over it, more or less. Um, yeah, so you can see that the quality is just really amazing, and I would love to know what is your pipeline here. So what what programs are you using, and how long does it take to create, or take you to create such a movie, and what are the techniques that you're using?
Yeah, so I mean, this film Grump of the Night was conceived very long time ago, back in 2017. It's based off like a single paragraph description that my brother had written as a way for me to like get started doing like a short film, because back in 2017 I was really starting to learn how to use Cinema 4D more. and using more of these like GPU-based renderers like Redshift or Octane. So I wanted to sort of have a film that was both achievable for one artist to do, while also sort of having, you know, the sort of comedic, fun, whimsical tone that I try to do in all my work. And yeah, so this was put on the back burner for many years after trying to do it as like a 2D film, a 3D film. And then in late 2021, I went back to it, and realized that after like all these years of doing commercial projects and some other like much smaller short films, that the time might now be right to sort of pick that back up, and then sort of modernize it with like all the sort of character techniques, the modeling things that I've sort of refined after doing a number of like much smaller shorts. And yeah, getting into my actual pipeline, this film specifically, and all my other short films that I do for like non-commercial projects, those are all basically done more or less by myself, at least for the production side of it. I'll have a whole, I do have some writers and composers that help with the pre and post-production part of it, but all the modeling, the animation, texturing, cinematography, all that stuff is just done by me. And for this film, that was over about 4-ish month period of time. So basically, it started in late December, where I start to do the modeling, the texturing. And in terms of programs, basically the whole workflow, all of it starts in ZBrush, because I want to start doing characters first, getting that all sort of worked out. So I'll go from ZBrush to then rigging it on mixmo.com, refining that rig in Cinema 4D, making like a whole facial rig for it, and making that all look right. Once that's all done, moving to Substance Painter, get all the skin textures, the clothing, all that stuff done. And then I just sort of bring it back all into Cinema 4D with Redshift, where I actually work on the specific shaders. And then the most fun part is doing the actual animation, because for me, I use motion capture animation, which you can actually see a bit right now, where I have like a suit that I'll put on. And that's basically how this whole film was basically done, is me basically miming out all the actions for every character in every scene. And then once I have all that data, take it into Cinema 4D, refine it, make sure, you know, the feet are going where they should be, characters' heads are looking in the right directions. And then I'll just hand animate all the facial animation, all the hand, finger animation, and then finish that all up with the lighting, the rendering, and then finally compositing later in After Effects. And then I'll just do all the sound design, the editing, and then we get our awesome composers to get the music done, and we put that all into Premiere, and then that's the whole film. So it's quite a process, but you know, it's all part of this like very refined workflow that I've tried to like work on for the past like 4 years. So basically, it's a very streamlined process at this point. But yeah, there's a lot of steps.
Yeah, it appears to be, because when I hear you saying that it took you like 4-ish months to create that, what we see right now, I think that is totally incredible and totally awesome. Um, so you mentioned that you start using, well, let's start somewhere else. So you've got 4 characters in there, right? So
Uh, yep. If you count the ghost as a character, they are also there.
yeah, and you created mocap animations for all of them, right? Even the
Yep.
ghost, when he's like turning the head, where he has got the lamp on his head, and then you've got how many sets? It's the living room, right?
Yeah.
It's the sleeping room
Yeah,
upstairs, and it's
basically like
outside.
the 3 sets of, yeah, the living room with the kitchen on the side, the actual bedroom that we see for one shot or for 2 shots,
Yeah,
so not very long, unfortunately, and then the actual exterior of the house for the big opening and ending shots.
yeah. So how long does it take you to create one of these sets, and how much is like manual modeling work? How many assets do you buy from online platforms?
Yeah, so pretty much the main part of the whole set, and the first thing I actually made with the film is this living room, because basically there's one main angle of the whole film where we see the chair, the TV. So I really wanted to nail that down first, get the whole vibe and the sort of aesthetic of the film figured out with the texturing and how everything's going to look. So I started on that very early on, and to do that set, I believe it probably took me about, I'd say maybe like a week or a bit more than a week of, and it was a combination of both pre-made assets that I might buy online, then modify and texture myself so it all sort of fits together into the same style. And then other assets that I actually hand model myself, because either there's not like a good one that I can find online, or I just really want a specific look. So a lot of like, the big structures of the room are all just hand modeled. The windows, bookshelves, paintings, other stands that like the TV are on, things like that. But then for some other assets where it's like really easy to find some awesome looking things online, things like the TV or like the lamp, I'll actually just, find a model and then modify it to fit this sort of cartoony aesthetic, and then do all the texturing again, because, it won't always match with sort of the very like semi-realistic stylized look that I'm going for. So it definitely is like a mix and match for assets, because, if I were to do everything 100% from scratch, it definitely would have taken probably like a year to do that. But yeah, I mean,
even that would have been incredibly fast. A year for such a project. So
I have one question.
yes.
When I watched the 3 motion and design show, I noticed that you have a lot of attention to detail. And what I wrote down was storytelling details. Can you tell us a little bit more about the approach when you get stuff that you don't make it nice, that you use it to tell your story? What is your thought process?
For like the individual props, you mean, or?
Yeah, every prop tells a story and supports the main actor and so on.
Yeah, so I mean, it really, the way I sort of go about, like, I guess, designing these props, and especially with the texturing part, is definitely the whole aesthetic of the room. Once I have that figured out, I had this whole idea in my mind that the room, it definitely wants to look like, this definitely isn't like the past. I imagine the film is probably sometime around like the 60s or something like that. But I really wanted the whole thing to look like maybe like your grandpa's house, what the living room might look like. So everything had to have this sort of definitely old-fashioned quality with like the rug, the textures on like the chair, all had to have this old sort of musty, used vibe to it at least. And the big sort of way I wanted to do that outside of like the main hero props, which is obviously the old tube television, and the chair itself, is the actual picture frames in the background, I think really inform the whole aesthetic of the room itself, because, and I spent definitely at least a day searching both in my own like art that I've made on my that I've made before, and online for like some stock images that both like sort of walk the line between being having like the old painterly aesthetic, like a picture you might find in again in your grandpa's house, and also not standing out too much. So really, if you do look at those pictures in the background, some of them can be pretty bizarre, especially the ones that are off in the corner that are less noticed, are definitely some of my weirder art that I've made. But the hero ones, obviously, you have like an old ship in the background that's like a hand drawing. You have like a classic painting of a bowl of fruit. And I do think, if I were to just like replace those pictures with just like, pictures of like a normal family, or like something more modern, it definitely would make the whole, I guess, story of the room feel more modern, and therefore less the aesthetic I was going for.
I think you wouldn't have connected with the ghost when you had just a modern or a present time fashion in the room.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
the
exactly.
whole aesthetic, and I noticed that there was, it just fits like a glove what you have done to the whole story.
Yeah, because the other reason for setting this like in the past, is because the whole thing is inspired by like the sort of classic, sort of cartoons of like the 50s and 60s, where there's always this like sort of classic back and forth rivalry between two characters, like Tom and Jerry or something like that. And so we really wanted to sort of bring about that aesthetic by making it sort of feel older, and sort of more rustic, I guess, as opposed to making this like a flat screen TV with like a very modern looking like leather chair or something like that. It just would have given a different vibe for sure.
No, well done. Let's put it
Thank
that
you.
way.
Yeah, really. So I also like did like part of set design for like a character, and it can be pretty exhausting to find all of the things that you want to tell using the set as your tool. So you don't have to tell it like in shots, because every single shot is an enormous amount of work. And if you can put the backstory into the set instead, that's worth a lot. Also in
Yeah,
terms of time.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, what I'm interested about or interested in the process that you have for your characters. So even like the layout phase, like even before you go into ZBrush, unless you start in ZBrush, but I guess there is
Oh no,
some
yeah.
sort of planning process or to like mood board and stuff like that to get to yeah where you want to get in the end.
Yeah. So actually, I think this might be a good time I can share my screen and just show
Yeah.
some of the pre-production stuff I ended up doing.
Yeah, give me a
Um,
second. Here we go.
yep. All right. Can you see this?
Yeah, we can see your
Yeah.
screen.
All right. Yeah. So I mean, the first step with all my characters is the Pinterest board. I love Pinterest because it really it gives you a lot of options first off, and you can add all these pictures to individual boards. Um, but especially and I've talked about this before. Once you find like that one good image, you can always click on it, and below it there's like a whole set of like similar images that I just like go through and like start clicking all of them and adding them to these boards. And in the end, I basically made sort of an average of what I wanted my character to look like. So you can see just scrolling through here, there's a whole number of different features and traits that I've like sort of taken from each of these images and put into my final character design. So when approaching this sort of the main hero character, the dad, I wanted it to at least be like a little distinct from my previous characters that I've done before. Um, so that basically meant definitely pushing the stylization a bit more than I might usually do. I really wanted to get to do the thin legs, thin arms, big nose, and then big beer belly for the character itself, just because I thought that'd be a nice, appealing look for this sort of character. So you can see, I got definitely a lot of references for that. Definitely a lot of big noses. Um, and then, yeah, fun fact: this is actually the very original design I made for the character back in 2018 when I tried to make this film a second time as like a 2D film.
Mm.
And you can see it's actually it does have like a resemblance to the final character, but the main thing I changed obviously is the limbs are a lot longer. He's definitely more human proportion now, which for motion capture is very key. You can't do motion capture with a character that has these stubby legs and stubby
Yeah.
arms. It would just be an absolute nightmare. Um, but yeah, once I have this whole like set of references, um, I go into my drawing program and actually then start to sketch out a very rough version of the character, which is basically just for me. Like I wouldn't give this to any sort of professional character designer and expect them to sort of work off of that. But since I'm the one doing it, it can be very rough. It's basically just so I can block out the overall details of the character, getting things in there like the big mustache, the stubble that he has, figuring out like how the pajamas might fit him. And getting that sort of whole look figured out. And you can see I also drew him in the actual living room background itself, just to make sure, whatever I came up with meshed with the whole aesthetic of the piece, because he's a very stylized character. So I definitely wanted the living room itself to also have that same aesthetic. So even after I drew this, I did go back to the living room, adjusted some proportions so that they all sort of felt like they're part of the same world. But yeah, but then after I go into that, I'll definitely go into ZBrush and actually, start sculpting the character. And I've talked about this in the motion design show as well. But like, what I do for the character is I'll always start with a base with a base mesh in ZBrush. So that basically means a character that's already been pre-sculpted, and so you have all the key features of the character, the arms, the legs, the nose. It's all sort of like lined up, but done so in like sort of a more generic way, just as a way so I can then take that and then sculpt my own details like on top of it, adjusting all the proportions and And that just saves me so much time in both retopology. I don't have to do like any of that. And then doing UVs, which, that doesn't take too long to begin with, but it still saves me that time. So the actual main character started from this base mesh here. And then through a bunch of, shifting, editing, scaling, I was able to then morph it into the final character, which you can see is pretty, I would say is pretty unrecognizable from the mesh he started from. But
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, doing that basically takes the production time of making a character in ZBrush down from like 2 to 3 days to basically 1, especially for this character who was a lot simpler and didn't have like didn't have many like accessories. You just had the one pajama set, which was pretty simple to create. But and yeah, once I get like that sort of ZBrush character figured out, it goes to it goes to Substance Painter to get that sort of skin texture figured out. And of course, like one of the big parts is always doing the facial rigging of the character, especially for a film like this where the character is very expressive, and there's going to be so many like extreme close-ups on him. He has to be doing all sorts of emotions, especially at the end of the film, because it gets pretty emotional. So there's always a sort of a big facial rigging process that I've had to refine throughout the years, because anyone who's done facial rigging before knows it can be quite difficult to create something, especially on like a stylized character that feels appealing. At least it doesn't go into that realm of being too creepy. But yeah, that's a whole process there where I've figured out throughout the years sort of a number of facial shapes I have to make for a character so that they can express like the right amount of emotion. Pretty much, they can hit all the beats that I need them to hit. They can be sad, they can be happy, all sorts of things. So you can see here. Yep.
Sorry, this is a really great thing to share, because typically when you, well, at least when I first rigged a character, and I also did like the blend shape or pose morph approach, then you don't really know how to create these blend shapes.
Yeah.
So you tend to create ready-made facial expressions, and then it's hard to blend between those. And what you can see here is pretty well is that there is a whole set of shapes just for the mouth, and then well, you cannot see that here. Well, there's the blink, but you can create all of these blend shapes like separately, like in just the nose, just the eyes, just the ears, and so on, and then you can mix them together, and therefore you're much more flexible when it comes to facial expressions, which is really, really nice.
Yeah, exactly. Like when I first started out, like I looked online for so long to find like a chart that looks like this, basically, where someone just lays out at least the bare bones sort of facial shapes you need for a character, like in this sort of film. And no one really had done that, because for facial rigging, obviously, it's like it does vary character to character. But for the type of stuff I do, what was that?
You broke up. I missed the word. Sorry.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was just saying, yeah, for I just find at least for characters that I do, that this sort of set of facial shapes works a lot better. And and this is sort of basically the bare bones set of shapes you might want to make for a film like Grump in the Night. But if this were obviously a better like Pixar film, this wouldn't hold up. This character can't speak. This character can't like say words or speak or do any sort of more nuanced facial expressions. But for something like this, it works great. And yeah, like you said, it is really a sort of a set of like different puzzle pieces that you can mix and match together to create any sort of amount of like facial shapes you might want. So, you always have you have things like the character frowning on one side, smiling on one side, doing like various like O shapes or other like eyebrow things. And like in the end, you can then take that and put it into a whole facial rig for the character itself. And at that point, you can then start to create a whole bunch of different expressions. So, I can just mix and match all these to create these like wild looking weird expressions for the character for like whatever the scene might call for. But that's just like this is just a quick example of how I've sort of built out this sort of facial rig pipeline over the years. And yeah, you can make some just weird stuff, or obviously, but maybe some more nuanced things for the film itself.
Yeah. So there's one thing I want to add here, because you mentioned that you didn't find like a good set of blend shapes that you should create for a face online. There is actually a book that I read back in the days when I was at university. It was called Stop Staring by Jason Osipa, and it's about facial rigging, and he's also doing the pose morph or a blend shape approach. And what I see here, what you figured out, is pretty much what he did. He has got like, I think, 40 shapes for the whole face, and that is then a really good yeah, basic set to get almost every facial expression that you want your character to have. So that's a book recommendation from my side. And
Yeah, that sounds like the perfect book, honestly.
it's really good. It's really good. And then the other thing that you mentioned is that this is like your standard um, facial rigging process. So what I saw in your presentation at 3D Motion Show is that you basically just copy and paste those interface elements into the scenes of your new character, and then you just create those blend shapes, and you just have to link them up via Expresso, and then it works already. And it didn't seem to be like a very time-consuming process anymore. It's very clever.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. You still have to basically, you still have to recreate all the facial shapes from scratch. But
Of course, yeah.
at least, luckily, yeah, I do have that sort of checklist of different shapes I have to go through at this point. So I have that sort of more streamlined. At least I know how to, after doing it for so many characters, I can definitely create it within a facial rig within like 2 hours. And yeah, like you said, the big part of that is because these control rigs that I have for both the hands and the facial rig itself have been passed down throughout my rigs over the years. I created this basic facial rig back in 2019, and I've just been copying and pasting it throughout my characters ever since. And yeah, I can just swap out Expresso controls, and it's all hooked up. And yeah, that's also why you can see like there are certain empty areas of the rig where there's no controls at all, because this was back when I needed to. When I had a different way of sort of creating characters, and I've taken out those controls since then, but the spots in the rig still remain. So if I ever happen to need to add a new control or something, I'll just like pick one of those, rename it, and then create a new control from there.
I found also one tip that you have given in the show last week, where you said I take only the left side and then I just mirror it,
Oh
so
yeah,
I copy it, which is a huge time saver, and I think everyone should know that. That's why I'm mentioning it. Could you
yeah.
just okay?
Yeah, that's just why I do. Yeah, I list only the L smile, L frown, L sneer, because when you're doing pose morphs in Cinema 4D, you can just right click on any shape you make, flip on the x-axis, and then you have the right side of the face, and that saves me half the time and makes it like perfectly symmetrical, which is like such a time saver.
Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's funny because that was also my process for rigging characters. I really like how close our approaches are. Although I have to admit that you are much faster. Okay, so so you said you do you create the shapes of your character in ZBrush. So I want to go back to the Z, well, not necessarily to the ZBrush part. My actual question is, what is your texturing workflow for the characters? Is it like yeah, poly painting in ZBrush, or do you create the textures using body paint or Substance or Photoshop, or what is your
Yeah,
workflow here?
so for the characters itself, it is all in Substance Painter pretty much. So I've actually created I've created a skin preset for this set of characters in this film, which, you know, it's because the characters themselves, if you look at like the renders, you know, they have some detail, but they're pretty, they're definitely flatter than obviously like real life human skin. There's less sort of pore detail and things like that. So pretty much the texturing for these characters is just I'll put on like the preset I've made, which, as you can see, has like some very subtle bumps in like the nose. You can see in the reflection on his head, he has some pores there. But it really is just sort of a general approach to doing this sort of like human skin texturing that works well on stylized characters, but obviously I wouldn't do it for something that was a bit more realistic. But yeah, once I do that, I'll just add the red areas for things like the nose, under the eyes, or like those are a little purple. And then the stubble itself has its own like 5 o'clock shadow that I've painted under that. And then for things like the eyes, you know, for things like the eyes, those are like similar to my facial rig. Those are passed down throughout the years from all my characters. So you can see, at least in the last 2 or 3 years, all my characters use the exact same eye textures because it's just the same exact thing pasted from one thing to another. And I believe these were something I had purchased online and then have used for all my characters since then, since they do sort of draw, or they do sort of again walk the line between being too realistic and being kind of stylized. So I find them to be like a great little middle ground for eye detail that I think really makes them stand out, especially like the close-ups that you have in this film.
Yeah, especially his eyes are really, really like intense. So,
Yeah.
and that, well, I found that this is something very positive. There are some expressions in the movie where I just looked into his eyes and was like, wow, that's a lot of expression in there. Um, and yeah, a big part of that is coming from that texture that is really, really great. But also, of course, coming from the rigging and the animation.
Yeah, and like and one other like reason that I love to use this sort of eye model that I've since bought online is it does have actual, you know, geometry inside the eye, which when I started out like 2 or 3 years ago doing like characters, I would just take a sphere and then put an eye texture on top of that, which it can work from afar, but for these like close-ups in the film, having like actual having the eye actually have like bend inward, like real eyes do,
Mhm.
gets the light to actually shine on the iris properly. So it actually illuminates the correct part of like the sort of colored part of the eye, which does make those the reflections all look right. And in the close-ups, it really does sell as being like an actual human eye, which, you know, really helps.
Yeah, totally. So, when you're, well, I forgot to ask one question about the face rig or setting up the face rig. When you create all of these pose morphs or blend shapes, are you just creating like the final shape, or are you also like creating like some sort of corrective shape? So, for example, if you mix two expressions, sometimes that looks weird, and then it would be possible to blend another blend shape into that mix to get rid of the like arrows or weirdness in the combination.
Yeah, for me, yeah, there really are not many corrective blend shapes I'll put over top of this character, but definitely it's on a scene by scene basis. So so for certain scenes, like especially near the end of the film, the character itself needs to sort of cry, and I've never really made a facial a blend shape for crying because that's not a common thing that like characters in like my little short animations do. So for
Yeah.
those particular scenes, I had to go back into my character rig and make a new crying control for the character. So if I just undo all this, um, yeah, there's a new like control I added right there just for this character. That when I do it, he definitely does, his face definitely strains up a bit, so he can start to cry like a little bit in the ending scenes. But in terms of actually correcting the correcting shapes, that there's not a lot of that goes on. I know for like the only corrective shape I've done in this character, I believe, is one to fix any gaps that are between the eye and his circular eye holes in his face, just so you don't see through the model, since there was some slight issues with that. But the beauty of having this whole like preset workflow of facial rigging is I know what facial shapes work with other ones, and of course I make sure not to push them too far. When they start to break a bit, I'll pull back, and and that will generally be enough for the facial expression I need.
Yeah, cool. So,
speaking of expression, do you have any acting experience, or how do you feel when you act out with your capture suit, or how do you feel about it? And I have a follow-up question after that.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just gonna play. I'll just play this while I'm talking about that. But yeah, I have like limited acting experience. I definitely used to do plays in high school, and I did short films where I acted them in college. But I'm definitely not an actor by any means. For things like motion capture, it's really a skill I've sort of picked up over time, meaning that like that I learned what does and doesn't work for doing motion capture. So say I did like a short film like 2 years ago, and I did all the motion capture for that, but then I put it onto my stylized characters, and I realized, oh shoot, I didn't exaggerate the motions enough. It looks so muted on this character. And I learned from that. And then going to my next film, I'm like, all right, I gotta like, when I'm moving the arms, I have to be like way up here, and I gotta really like, sort of animate my body a lot more. And so, like I said, it's just like a skill I pick up over time, where I know what does and doesn't work for these stylized characters. So, and as an animator, any animator I imagine can say that they do think about the sort of how the body like moves, and what does and doesn't look good, especially for these like cartoonish animations. So it is just sort of a skill I've picked up after doing like all these sort of more stylized cartoony films. And yeah, you can see in this video here that it can look pretty silly, but
is that
that's how it is?
Oh, sorry, go on, Sassi.
I had a follow-up question. I saw you use Mixamo, and my question was, when you have a character where you have an idea what the character does, how he would express, and then use from Mixamo something completely different, where these guys all of a sudden be a zombie or something like that, exactly there. How do you feel when your wonderful puppet, for example, all of a sudden acts completely out and is different? Is that a revelation? Is that a creative process for you? Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah, well, I gotta say, like going to mixamo.com, which for those who don't know, it's a website that Adobe has, where you can just put your character rigs and on that website, and it'll rig it up with like a skeleton, and then you can pick from this like giant motion capture library, and so you just see how the character like behaves with all these like dance animations or running, jumping. And for me, that's like the best part, because it's the first time after modeling in ZBrush that I see the character like basically come alive and express themselves in like these sometimes pretty silly animations, because there's nothing more fun than like taking your like serious character and then just putting like some breakdancing animation on top of it. But for me, that is really, I get such a boost of motivation after going to Mixamo and putting the animation on the character. And yeah, was there another part to the question, or did that?
Oh, that was pretty much all. I mean, when you see your character does a life on its own based on Mixamo, if you get ideas, that was the creative question.
Oh yeah. Yeah, not for this film, but I did do I have done a film last year that was more of a cyberpunk running through the streets of like a cyberpunk city, where early on I was able to take that character rig to Mixamo, and there's so many like parkour, flipping, jumpy animations on that website that I actually did end up taking like several of the clips they have on this motion library and putting it into the film itself, just because like it looked so perfect on the character rig, doing like the wall jumps and all the flips and the slides. So it was just like perfect to incorporate into the film itself.
Yeah, and you said motivation in the last answer, and I have to ask you, and I promised I will do this, of course. I know on my own how to make a movie. It's always easy to say, hey, I make a movie about this and whatnot. But in the moment you have to face really the production, maybe there's a day where it goes really all south and you don't want to do it anymore. And how do you go through those phases and how do you keep motivated? How do you keep up the spirit and the energy and obviously the quality that you have?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely like a tough one for anyone to stay motivated on a project. I can only speak for my own experience, in that I definitely try and do the projects that at least excite me. That's why in between commercial projects that I do, I always try and fit in these sort of short films that always lean heavily into different, like, just fun ideas that I find super appealing. And that's just why I bring up my ArtStation page here. It's like all the personal projects that I've done between these projects. But I guess just speaking of, like, I guess how I sort of got to where I am today, it really is, with all 3D or any sort of art form, I'd say it really is a slow build that you have to do to get to, like, doing these very, like, big budget complex projects. So like, if you ever, like, go all the way back and see, like, my early projects, the way I learned pretty much is back in, like, 2017, when I was first, like, figuring out how to do more complex things in Cinema 4D, is I start with these very small projects, this one-off quick little things like this, like, cabin here, that was very simple to create. And it was just one shot of, like, this little cabin and this waving grass that I could achieve at, like, the level I was at. And I use the skills that I learned from doing, like, this cabin, the modeling, the texturing. I take that onto, like, my next project, which is, like, doing something like an isometric room, where it's, like, similar skills, but then I'll learn, like, a bit more about texturing, how to model, how to do lighting that looks a bit more realistic. And then this goes on for, a few years, using these, like, different, like, personal projects of mine to motivate myself to sort of learn new techniques. So if you ever go back, like, through my Instagram or something, you can see there's always a new, like, element that I've added in every new, like, short film that I've done, where, like, first it was, like, doing motion capture, then it was doing, like, human characters with, like, eyes, then it was, like, adding, like, a mouth to characters so they can be more expressive. After that, it might be doing, like, hair dynamics or, like, clothing dynamics. So that's all just to say that, the way I try to motivate myself to sort of advance, like, my knowledge of, like, Cinema 4D or just, like, 3D in general, is through these, like, little using these projects as, like, little stepping stones that get more and more they get bigger and bigger, but always, most importantly, they start small. They start within my sort of reach as an artist. So because I've seen because I've myself, I've definitely been guilty of trying to reach for too much when doing a project, and it ends up fizzling out because it's, like, way too complicated or complex for, like, what I can do. So yeah, just starting small, trying to learn from there.
Yeah, when it doesn't scare you, why doing it, right?
Yeah, exactly. There always should be at least a little bit of a new experimentation in every project. You shouldn't just keep doing the same thing.
Yeah, we have one question in the chat. Do you have any interest with metahumans to animate them or do productions with people?
Well, I mean, funny enough that you say that, because I wouldn't say I am interested in metahumans specifically, but for my most recent project, which I am actually working on right now, I've used all the assets that come with metahumans, like the skin textures, the eye textures, things like that. I've used those and created, like, my own, like, new character texturing, like, technique, I guess, that creates, like, a even more sort of semi-stylized, realistic character. But unlike the characters in Grump in the Night, they are, if you zoom in on them, they actually do have more pore detail that you can see, that because it's all scanned from, like, a real person, obviously. So yeah, that's what I'm just doing for my most recent project, because even though I might not use the really high detail, awesome looking models that metahumans provides, I think the textures themselves are just great for repurposing for my own more stylized characters.
Thank you.
So yeah, one thing I want to point out, I just want to say it when you went through your through all your projects. It is funny that you mentioned that, hey, these down here, these are the very early ones, because what I can see here is it's just all very high quality and really impressive, like from the beginning. It's
Well, I
really,
mean,
really
I
cool.
don't post my my very early things, but yeah, for sure. These are. I think I still like my old stuff for sure, but I've definitely learned in some key ways at least.
It's impressive.
Thank you.
So, yeah, what are we going to talk about next? Do we have more stuff that is, well, we talked about the ZBrush workflow, the rigging, also a little bit about the MoCap side. I would love to know how difficult of a process it was to get this MoCap workflow as streamlined as possible. So I guess there was a lot of trial and error, right? And how long did it take you to really get to a point where you can say, yeah, now I can work efficiently with the stuff that I got?
Yeah, yeah, I did talk about this a lot in the 3D motion design show that I did. I'm just going to the more specifics of the workflow that I've sort of done, or at least figured out over the years. Because I'll use I'll basically, like I said, use the motion builder tag in Cinema 4D, which just lets me take all my motion capture clips, mix and match them, speed them up, slow them down. But all this was after a whole, I believe, like 2 month period in 2018, where it was basically me with my motion capture suit, just trying to figure out what all the little issues I was running into were, because sometimes it has to be sort of very specific to figure that out. And that, yeah, like I said, that was a 2 month period of trial and error. But after that, it really set up the whole workflow that I use now. And this sort of clip I show here is the culmination of all those efforts after the 2 month period of trying to rig up this very first motion capture character, which was this guy. Um, um, but yeah, luckily now Cinema 4D does have other motion capture sort of features that are a bit more streamlined than the motion builder tag that I continue to use today. But I would recommend checking those out, checking out the Mixamo rig, or just any of the newer things that they have, because they all work great for doing motion capture.
So yeah, what are these features in particular? Are you referring to like retargeting or to more stuff in the motion system or?
Yeah, I'm basically referring to the new the retargeting tag that you
Mm,
mentioned. Yeah, the character solver, the character definition tag.
yeah.
I've yet to fully experiment with those. I've used them a bit, but using them actually gets around all the sort of trial and error stuff that I had to figure out back in the day. But they do still lack a few of the features of the motion builder itself, which is in the motion system tag. They do lack some of those features. So I continue to use that one just because of the aforementioned ability to cut and paste, mix and match, stretch, and squish various motion capture clips together, and really figure out the performance that I want from like maybe a number of different takes that I've got.
Yeah, and I mean, if you can use the retargeting just to get like a mocap animation coming from a character that has completely different proportions than the one you are working with at the moment, then that's already fine. Then you can just bake it and then you throw it into the motion system and you can use it there.
Yeah, exactly. So there is a bunch of ways to approach doing this whole thing. Mine is just one way of doing it for sure.
Yeah, so let me quickly, I'm just going to Google something because I once like also did a presentation about
Th-
motion capture stuff. So I just want to paste the link in the chat as well.
And Jonas, someone asks you, since you have recommended stop staring, is motion capture the only way, or how to get into animation, into character animation? Brian Smith wants to know how to get all this data, all this knowledge. And if I'm not mistaken, Kris, you complained about that in 2017 there was not enough, or not enough as you would like to have. And yes, it's a running target pretty much. It's always evolving. And it's hard to keep up. We have seen in the last 10 years maybe the amount of books dropping because it's too fast to write a book before you have printed it. And in the stores, it's already the next step. Can you explore or share a little bit?
So, well, my process of getting into it was just the fun of doing something with characters. So I was interested in that, like, yeah, how you can express stuff and seeing, well, right now, seeing that the MoCap approach also works for cartoon characters is just opens up a whole new level for me because I always thought, well, I think MoCap is still too real for that sort of stuff. So that's something I learned today, for example, and I might have a look into MoCap. So it's all about like being and getting inspired and just wanting to like create a character, and then you will figure that stuff out. The book that I mentioned, Stop Staring, is not just good for the rigging process itself or for setting up those blend shapes. It's also a lot of theoretical stuff behind it, and also one thing that is that got clear to me um, while reading that book is that rigging doesn't start with creating joints. Rigging starts in the modeling process because you already have to um, yeah, take the rigging into account when you create your topology. And for example, in the face, that's extremely important that you create circles around the main um, areas because that's the way how the muscles um, are in the face. So like you would have like circles around the eyes. You would have one circle that is like going over the nose and then down until the chin or something like that, just to create this crease that you get when you're smiling, for example. And you have to know where these features will appear um, when you model your character. So yeah, it's about being or keeping yourself inspired, I think. I don't know, Kris, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I definitely agree with all the things you're saying there. Yeah, even though I do use motion capture basically for everything I do, because it definitely is like the quickest way of getting something done. But like you said, like if your characters are more stylized or more cartoony than like this guy is in my short, then motion capture is going to look a little strange when applied to, say, a very cartoon character. So there are applications for both motion capture versus hand animation. And I just basically, whenever I plan a short film, I always try and make sure it's something that's achievable with motion capture. But yeah, if you definitely want to do something like keyframe animation, which definitely is superior over motion capture in that it's a lot more planned out, it's a lot more artistic looking, and just has a bit more appeal to it because you're basically crafting it frame by frame. Then I think that's like a great way to go. And in terms of just resources, like I definitely have a bit of a background in doing some keyframe animation. But since I'm only one artist, I tend not to try and do a lot of things like that. But there are a lot of like online classes if that's something you want to learn. Like I did Animation Mentor a few years ago, and that basically takes you through the beginning to end of doing CG animation from like animating like a ball to like a dog to a character, and then creating like your own little scene after that. So I definitely would recommend like some of those like online courses because they can be like very informative and definitely help you along the way.
Yeah, let me add to all of that when you sit maybe in a coffee house, you can't just observe people how they move because that is the first step normally to get reference material, to see how something works, how you respond maybe to certain movements with the hands or whatever. And from there, I think you can pretty much imagine how a joint inside of the arm affects all the points of the mesh. And as Jonas pointed out, every single movement will create some kind of response inside of the surface. And so you have to see it maybe after a while when you observe people. And that can be done in a coffee house, just sitting there having your coffee and working hard on your skills.
Yeah, another book recommendation I have here is
Ed, I, yeah,
see,
yeah,
what is it? Is
can
it the same that I just wanted to
I?
recommend?
No, this is just to fill in how old I am already. When I started in the 90s, light forms was something, poser was something, because you had just joints or bones at the time, and that was just more a deformer in an organized way. And all these systems that we have today with motion clips and whatnot is so fantastic and so different than 20, 25 years ago that I think everyone should try it at least, because whatever you get that is complicated or so, it's not true so much anymore. It's complex, yes, but you can learn it, and we are there for you to help you with your progress, of course.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. So, yeah, the other book that I wanted to recommend is, especially when it comes to like watching people and like getting the reference. A good thing is a good book to read is Acting for Animators by Ed Hooks. Um, so I once like joined a class at FMX in Stuttgart with him, and he's a really funny person. He's an actor himself, and he's teaching like the big studios how acting works and how you can, um, yeah, link those acting techniques over to animation. But not just that. It's about storytelling and um, yeah, that that there's always something that happened before the shot and that is going to happen after the shot, and you have to take that into account. And there are really a lot of things that are helpful for creating your stories, for rethinking what your character or what you already animated, for example. So that was a really good one, a really helpful one.
And a good one that you did, Jonas, was with Marta, and Michelle posted a link in the chat. Please have a look. It's 1 hour of really solid information. I enjoyed watching it. And Marta is someone who makes a lot of motion capture for games. So she has a lot of tips how to make loops and all of that.
Yeah.
It's it's a wonderful tip. Thanks, Michelle. Okay, more. Compositing and workflow and red giant and particles and candies that I want to have and whatnot. You have so much to share. Can you explore that with us a little bit more? The final part of the pipeline?
Yeah, absolutely. Where is that? Yeah, so I mean, for compositing on this film, like after the whole thing's rendered, there definitely was a bit of that per shot, but only in a few key ones did I actually go into in depth with the level of compositing that I might normally do. For all these like normal shots of the film, it really was just like adding like vignettes, doing color correcting, adding some glow, some film grain to make it feel like a bit more realistic. All of which use things like red giant looks and things like that to get that look. But for more sort of in-depth compositing, there's scenes like the opening and ending scenes where the rain is involved that I actually did like more sort of advanced compositing, where for this scene at least, I wanted to add like this torrential like downpour of rain, but obviously doing a simulation of that is just like completely way too much for my computers or most computers to handle without it sort of exploding or taking way too long to render. So what you see here is actually just like it's actually just a compositing of a bunch of action VFX elements of rain pouring down in the background, in the foreground, and then also like rain splashing on like a surface. And what's great about Cinema 4D to After Effects is that I'm able to basically just drag in my Cinema 4D shot of like this opening shot drag it into After Effects, and then hit the extract button to actually get the camera information into my After Effects scene. And it makes then adding like all these things like the rain and any other effects like track perfectly into this 3D scene with like this moving camera. So we don't even like really notice that like this was actually done after the fact. And then like, yeah, and then here's just the other example of like more advanced compositing that I did to make this window look like it was super rainy as the camera moved out. And, you know, once again, that's a lot of camera tracking from the information I get out of my Cinema 4D scene. There are so many passes, render passes that were exported to get the rain on the window look, to get the smudges, to get the, and then once again, I'm putting just a stock element of rain in front of the camera to give that sort of rainy vibe, as opposed to, you know, simulating it beforehand.
I'm interested in one more thing that you already mentioned, and that is how exactly did you create that rain? Because the rain is looking really awesome. And I was like, is that simulated? No, it can't be simulated. That wouldn't be fast enough for your workflow. But it looks really good, especially the point when they are hitting the ground and those splashes are there. How did you create that?
Yeah, so I mean, for the rain in this shot, it is, like I said, it's part of actionvfx.com. They sell so many rain assets pretty much that you can buy and just place into your scenes. But of course, you have to prepare your scene before you render stuff like that to actually make it fully integrate into the shot. So you can see like before any rain's been added, here's like the raw scene where everything's been made pre-wet pretty much. So you can see there's a lot of reflections on the house, the trees, their leaves are very wet. The ground is super reflective. And I've also added, some fog into the background itself. And so all that combined, you know, and then going to After Effects, it was actually a really simple process of just dropping this all in, doing some blend modes, some depth passes to get the rain to sort of blend in the correct space from the camera. And that was that. But then for the throughout the film, you know, you can see where's a good shot? Yeah, you can see on the window, there's always this rain that's sort of going down on the window. It's constantly raining throughout the scene, and that's all animated. So you can see droplets of water sort of slide down the window. All of that is just a very complicated texturing that I actually purchased online from Gumroad. Someone made like an awesome loopable rain element, basically, where rain just collects on a window. It causes like smears as it, like, you know, goes down and wipes away like some of the fog. And so I just took that and just put it on the window, made it loop, and that's basically how that was done. And then I combined, you know, all that together for the very final shot where I did, you know, I have both that like texture element of the rain dripping down the window, you know, on the actual glass itself, and then combine that with my my stock elements of real rain falling in front of the camera. Add a bit more fog, some sound effects, and then you have like the whole sort of rain look. And I didn't have to spend all the time trying to simulate it that I might have otherwise done.
It's fantastic. It looks so convincing. It's embarrassing for me.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely was. There's a lot of experimentation before all this. You know, I make it sound a bit more simple, but yeah, I did at one point try to do some sort of a rain simulation thing with like some particle emitters in Cinema 4D, but it really just doesn't give the control that I might want and can look, you know, a little fake.
So, what format do you render to? Are you rendering like OpenEXR or something that is just 8-bit, or are you using a full 32-bit workflow, or maybe even
So for me,
ACES or something?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, yeah, ACES, I don't use ACES in the compositing part of it, since I don't get that fine tuned with the colors, but ACES obviously is just a huge, is a life changer for the way I've lit since I've used it for about 2 years now. It does make lighting like way more natural, but for actually exporting things, here's just, you can see here is a quick sort of look at all the passes that I do in a typical scene. I will export to EXRs with 32-bit workflow, and I'll have a ton of AOVs that I'll export with that. mainly puzzle mats. As you can see here, that's like what all the red, green, and blue cards are, where a puzzle mat basically will separate the objects that I want from the scene so I can actually add effects onto them. So that's pretty much the majority of my passes, where you can see, the background. The background here is highlighted, and the floor is highlighted in another one. And then in After Effects, I talked about this in my in the motion design show. I can then take that and use it to add any sort of levels effects or blur or do any sort of things like that. And that makes up basically the majority of my compositing, is just highlighting objects in the scene, making them darker, making them brighter. So in the actual, where is that? So in the actual film, in a particular shot, for example, I believe the most common thing I did in like a shot like this is I actually darkened the yellow chair, because it was so yellow. Once I exported it, that was actually quite distracting. So luckily I did an AOV that just highlighted the chair itself. I could, isolate that in After Effects and then just darken that down. Same with like his pajamas. They were also like almost luminescent with how bright they were. So these have been darkened from the original render. But, because I had this like perfect puzzle mat that I exported, you can't actually tell that there's like a whole curves effect over top of it that's like sort of bringing it down a bit.
Yeah, that's, by the way, one of my favorite shots in the whole movie.
Thank you.
Yeah, nice warm and cold contrast, so which would lead to how much color work do you do? And I know someone in our team would die to talk to you about this, and how would this go into a whole color grading session? Can you give me some insights about your cinematography? Because I think it starts always with director cinematography discussions. What is the look of the movie, and what do you want to express? Where's your center point? Where you want to lead the eyes, and all of that? Maybe some insights of that?
Yeah, so I mean, for cinematography, unfortunately, this is one of my more, I guess, subdued films when it comes to cinematography, because it does, at least, camera angle wise, it does rely on this wide shot for a lot of it. But I still wanted to have moments of very dynamic camera, especially in the beginning. That was like the main shot where I really wanted to sort of catch the audience's attention with this like very fancy, smooth swooping in shot through the house into the TV. And then we settle into the more traditional wide angles and some of that. But, like you said, there are points in the film where the camera breaks away and becomes a lot more dynamic and a lot like more handheld, just to communicate a certain vibe. And for shots like those, one thing I'll use is the, I believe it might be called a CamTrack AR, which is like an iPhone app where you can just take your iPhone, record like a camera motion, and this app actually records that in 3D space, and then gives you an FBX that you can then bring into Cinema 4D and use to sort of animate a camera in a very handheld way. So that's what I would do here. With sort of it took like very little effort to get this sort of look going. But
what is the name of that app again?
I believe, well, all right, I'm going to just double check. Yeah, CamTrack AR. I know it's on the iPhone, the Apple App Store. I'm not sure about other places, but yeah, CamTrack AR, it's a very helpful app. You do have to pay some money for it, but if you're expecting to do like a lot of handheld sort of movements, it's so awesome to
super
use.
Useful. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So I've been using that in like my films for a while, but yeah, for other shots, I'll just use a Vibrate Tag in Cinema 4D just to get some shaking. But for all these like wide shots of them doing like tug of war here, this is all me just doing my iPhone and making like shaking my hands just a little bit to get the natural motion going.
Yeah, that's cool. I just wanted to ask you about the if you also tried the Vibrate Tag approach, and what you would see as the main advantage of like each of these approaches. So when would you use the Vibrate Tag, and when would you use CamTrack AR to really get a real camera movement?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess the difference I would describe between the two is that CamTrack AR it really does feel like a very natural handheld camera, which can go be a plus or a minus for a certain scene. I would say because a handheld camera that's like very erratic, you know, when someone's holding an iPhone, there's gonna be so many little shakes in there. That can work great for the scenes when I need it, like these wide shots. Here, I really wanted to have a very random motion. But then there are other shots later in the film. I'm not sure where, but there are other shots where I don't want to draw attention to the camera, but I still want some movement in there because I don't really want a static camera for certain shots. So the vibrate tag, especially if you put it on like a low speed and just tell the camera to like slowly, you know, rotate around, maybe hover up and down, you know, that's like a great application for that when it's something that's a lot more subtle and needs to be a lot more sort of, I guess, procedural. It doesn't have to look as natural. So that it doesn't draw the audience's attention to the fact that the camera is actually shaking right now, but still gives you that sense of movement. And like fun fact, you know, the most of the animation on the can itself is using a vibrate tag throughout. So all the like up and down floating motion as it like rotates in the air, that's all just like a very low, slow vibrate tag. And then I'll just put my own hand animation over top of it with sort of the spring effect that you have in the track modifier tag. Just get that sort of bouncy back and forth motion. But yeah, there's pluses to each. I use the vibrate tag for all sorts of things, even like facial animation. If I need a character's like lip to like quiver when he's crying, I'll put like a vibrate tag on that control, so it just goes up and down at random points.
Yeah, that's clever. Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So, do you have another question about cinematography, Sassi?
I think we could talk about this for hours, but what I found when you look to the house, it's bluish in the background. The house is yellow. You come in, the armchair is yellow, and the surrounding is blue. There's a rapid theme from my point of view, and of course it leads you more and more to see some structures, to see where the main guy is, who is invisible, of course. So you need to lead the eye. It's like making motion capture with your suit, where you have no props, you have to improvise. And the same is true for the audience, of course. They see something, there's something, but how to lead the eye to something that is invisible. And that is so well solved here in the scene. It's you train the audience to come into the scene and bang, you know exactly where to look at. And do I have a question about this? Maybe
I
tons,
could
but
definitely
it's
yeah, I mean, I can definitely talk about like sort of the color approach to when I was
yeah.
designing this shot here. Because yeah, like I said, this was the first one that I spent like a week or a week and a half on to sort of figure out what it's going to look like, and especially what the color of all the things are going to be. And in all my films, I always try to make the sort of main elements. Obviously, you want those to pop off the screen more so from the background. So that's why you do have this sort of primary dual tone color sort of color approach here, where the chair is sort of very saturated yellow. The guy is wearing this very saturated blue thing, and then the whole environment around them complements both of those without sort of drawing your attention away from like the main elements. So even though you can see this guy, you know, he has his blue pajamas. I then complement that with like the blue windows, the blue moonlight, and then same with the yellow chair. It also has its own like sort of complementing colors of like the lamp. The lamp casts a very orange glow throughout the scene. The wallpaper has its own sort of warm tone, but I've made sure it's a very sort of almost neutral white, but it does lean towards warm. Because if you were to imagine this wallpaper being like some sort of red or something, some other color that was less neutral, I think this whole scene would be a little loud visually, and you would start to lose characters like the chair, like the person in this sort of more complicated wallpaper. So that was sort of the whole balance, especially when lighting it, that I had to sort of figure out. And that's why the background behind him is very dimly lit. The moonlight like barely gets to it, but you still have some pops of color, especially with like the circular window up there. So he's not completely lost in like a void of darkness.
Yeah. So yeah, the staging is really good. Like even without the character in there, you know exactly where to look at. It's very clear. Not just because of well, it's the brightness, it's the saturation, it's the color temperature. It's also you're not using too much depth of field in there, but it's also just a little bit of that. But it would even work without the depth of field, I think. Um, which is actually a perfect segue for a thought that I had. You're rendering the depth of field in Redshift directly, right? So it's not a
Yep.
post effect.
Yeah.
What about motion blur? Do you add that in post, or is that also rendered into the Redshift rendering?
Yeah, that's all in Redshift. I've definitely experimented in the past with trying to do motion blur and like depth of field like in like After Effects using like various AOVs. But I do find when you're trying to fake that, especially with the depth of field, it just doesn't give you the same look if you were to
Yeah,
do it in post.
yeah,
Especially if like it's these close-ups, you really want to sell the motion blur, the depth of field, make it, and in total, like I don't find it adds too much render time onto these like already long frames. So it's definitely something I prefer to do, not in post.
yeah. So how long are the render times?
Yeah, this film, it really varied. I've had films before with certain shots that get up to like basically my sort of setup is I have four 2080 Ti's in my like main workstation. Um, so I've had shots before in previous films that have gone up to like 20 minutes per frame, which is the peak of what I've gotten to before. I would not recommend trying to do that, but for this film, it really varied between like reasonable render times and pretty absurd ones. If I were just to render this shot here without any people in it, that took me about, I believe, like 4.5 minutes with this sort of 2080 Ti setup I have.
Yeah.
But this is a very, I guess, there's a lot of hairs in this film, and hairs is really what I find drives my render times through the roof sometimes. So it might be even hard to tell, but things like the lamp, the chair, the rug, all have a bunch of tiny hairs on them
Mm.
because I really like the that sort of look they gave me. But especially a shot like I believe like the longest shots in the film are like ones like this where you have all three characters and the mother's pink bathrobe, which is there's so many hairs on that bathrobe. It really that one really drove up the render times for any shot the mother was in.
Yeah.
I think this one probably took closer to 10 to 12 minutes, maybe. And, that's basically the second half of the film got to that point. But um, overall, not the worst render times for a film I've done, but they certainly weren't short either. So it took me, rendering the whole film took about, I think about like a month of rendering it on like a few computers to try and get that done. But definitely the longest render, the longest render period that I've had to do
Yeah.
in my short films.
Are you using like render services as well in some of your projects, or do you always render like locally?
Yeah, it's always locally these days. I used to use a render service back in the day, but since then I've basically what I've done is I have my main computer that I've sort of built specifically for doing Redshift things, and then I had my older GPUs that I used to use back in the day, and I just repurposed those into a separate computer that I'll use as sort of with the team render that Cinema 4D has
Mm.
to render all the shots together. So I'll always have these like two computers working on that. And typically it's worked pretty well so far. This one was the longest it's ever taken, which I did not expect, but it is like a 4.5 minute film. So, so that was something, but overall, this film didn't have a deadline. So I didn't want to spend the money to go to a render farm, which would have been quite expensive. And I already have
Yeah, sure.
the computer set up here. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Wow, that's great. That's great. Are there any other questions maybe from the audience? I think we were pretty busy asking our own questions, and I think it looks like our audience wanted to ask pretty much the same questions or found them interesting enough to to not ask additional questions. Um,
They use our chat window more to praise the work, the insight, the quality, great work, and it's just fantastic. We have a wonderful audience. So
That's great.
maybe we have a good synergy at the moment. We ask and they love it.
Yeah, perfect. So,
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you, audience. Thank you, everyone.
absolutely, absolutely. So, yeah, in this case, I think if you're, or do you have more questions, Sassi, or if,
Maybe a totally cheesy one, and I know someone would like to know um, the TV. Was it Red Giant Universe? The
Uh,
RGB?
yeah, the TV that is indeed a Red Giant universe. Can't remember what the specific effect was called, but yeah, the TV
We,
the TV tube television VCR look. Yeah, that is totally all Red Giant right there. That's also how I did the slight warping of the TV itself, because that plugin also came with a very handy control to add that sort of bend that you see in tube televisions.
yeah. And okay, the Ghost. Is it composite? Is it with textures, shaders, or
Yeah, that is a well, I mean, yeah, that's basically in the compositing. So there is a whole separate pass where it's just the ghost isolated in the chair. I then add that on top of this shot where he's actually not there, and then it's basically I did try and mess around with various looks, but I think in the end it was basically just setting him to the screen blending mode, so you only see like the brightest parts of his form, and then adding just like a bunch of the optical glow effect on top of all of that to make him, have that sort of ethereal look. And then there might be some subtle, I think there might be some subtle distortion, waviness about him. But other than that, it's like a pretty simple effect.
yeah?
and very effective.
What is on my mind? Oh, sorry.
No, that, go on.
There's always a little lag in the internet, so someone starts talking and then it overlaps. Sorry for that. Um, what I found listening to you is that you have a network running, a network among people, artists, and so on. How much do you change things after discussions with them? How much energy you get from them? How much you feel well cared for because you are in a team? And speaking of team, I'm in a training team where we have wonderful people and everyone shares and we learn from each other. And I had some network in Berlin back in the days. So my question is, of course, maybe already answered, but I don't know how you feel about to have such a wonderful team that can create this great work. Can you explore this with us a little bit?
Yeah, man, it's definitely like it's definitely like a lot more relevant for, I guess, my like commercial projects where we then with me and my company will then scale up our team to actually have modelers, textures, things like that. But even for this film, where it was mostly sort of a one man project, it was and like so invaluable to have both my brother who wrote the actual script for it, and the awesome composers who made the music for the piece, because obviously the benefit of having a whole team is you can work simultaneously. So once I got the sort of the rough animatic of the film done, um, of the characters, like without clothing simulations or anything, it was just the whole thing lined up. I was able to hand that off to them like a month before the project was done, and then they could go through and do a number of iterations on music, and create like this awesome like sort of aesthetic for the whole like composition of the piece, while I was then doing the rendering, the lighting. So being able to just work in tandem simultaneously with even this very small team, and then having like all that support is truly invaluable, and especially on bigger commercial projects, you can't get that done. We wouldn't be able to get something like a commercial done in any reasonable amount of time if you didn't have an awesome group of people helping you along the way.
Cool.
Yeah,
And if I got the vibes right, Jonas is ready to wrap up because we have already
yeah, we are.
taken a little bit more time.
Yeah, I think that's no problem because it's just well, fantastic work, and all the stuff that you are sharing is so interesting, and Yeah, it's really great. Yeah, let me do the housekeeping in for the end here. So I'm gonna grab the screen back.
Yeah.
So
Because I
yeah,
think
go
his
ahead.
his teamwork description was such a good ending point. It was so well said, and I can encourage everyone to find friends and create a network and
Yeah,
really get that extra
absolutely.
energy into the
Yeah,
system.
work together, get feedback from each other. There's nothing more valuable than that. All right, so
Exactly.
yeah, let's do the housekeeping in the end. So here I'm again on the Maxon events page. So if you go to the Maxon website and then events or news events or maxon.net/events, you get to this side where you can see all the webinars that we are doing. Tomorrow we have VFX and Chill again. Then starting next Monday, we have another series of demystifying post-production webinars, and the topic is plan, shoot, edit, grade VFX. And next Thursday, we're gonna have another episode of Max on Color, and there is a lot of stuff going on. Just check out the website and yeah, tune in for everything that you're interested in. And the good thing is that even if you cannot make it, or if you want to rewatch something, you can go to the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel, and here you can find all the recordings of the stuff that we are doing. And last but not least, we have this Maxon Ask the Trainer exclusive wear merch shop, um, where you can yeah, use the coupon code that we're gonna paste again in the chat. And yeah, then you don't have to pay for the t-shirt itself. That's a gift. You only have to pay for the shipping, um, because we want to thank you for participating, and we hope that you enjoy what we are doing. So yeah, let me go back to the three of us here. And yeah, let's just say thank you, Kris, for joining us. That was very inspiring, very impressive, and just great work, really.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Um,
Yeah.
Always again. Yeah, I really hope that we can have you here more often. That would be really great.
Yeah,
Cool.
that'd be awesome.
So, thanks again, Kris, for sharing all of the stuff that you shared. Thanks, Sassi, also for asking questions. Thanks, Michelle, for taking care
Yeah.
of the chat in the background. And with all of that being said, there's only one thing left to say, and that's goodbye, everyone. Thanks for
Yeah.
watching.
Thanks for joining.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.